came out of North Korea, then you went to university in South Korea, so you got to see that culture as
Yes.
an outsider, and
Mm-hmm.
then you came to the United States and you got to see Columbia University. So what did you conclude about your time in Columbia University? What were your impressions? What do you have to say to people about what you saw?
And then oh my gosh. So that 4 years from 2016 to 2020, it was a complete madness. I I became very pessimistic about the Western world after university because like so literally in these humanity classes, even the economics, I was studying economics for 2 years and later human rights. The professor would send me the emails. Oh, this class we're gonna cover this. If it triggers you, you don't have to come to the class or don't even do the reading. I'm a rape survivor. I'm a slave. I gone through so many things, and they say, oh, this can trigger the rape. This can trigger this, and then like every before the class they say, let's go through what do you want to be called your pronouns. And my English is not that good. I sometimes mistakenly call him or she and then they start asking me to say they, and then I don't know how to incorporate in my English that pronoun properly. And it made me so nervous to talk in the classroom. And one day I got into a fight with my professor. She was saying, the fact that you're letting men holding door for you is you are giving in to their overpowering you. And I was like, no, isn't it kindness? Is it decency? I hold the door for people too. It's not like I'm trying to signal that I'm powerful than you. And she was like, Yeonmi, you're so brainwashed from North Korea. Like, and I was a scenario, of course my GPA is gonna be affected, and it's like, okay, I gotta really shut up. I gotta try to do my best to get a good GPA. So that 4 years I learned to censor myself all over again, and it became ridiculous. Like I
That's terrible.
literally, exactly, like I literally risked my life to say what I think is right. And now I'm like, contribute 4 years of time, try how to be create a safe space and be sensitive enough. So, and like, where am I? Like, where? And it gave me a lot of chaos. Like, did I become free? Like, was it? Where am I? Is there any truly free place in this world right now?
Well, okay, so you were in this university in Korea, and
Mm,
Korean universities are intense. And so
yes.
how would you contrast the quality of the education that you received, and they're very Western influenced, the South
Mm,
Korean
mm.
universities. So they're a product of the Western university system. So how would you contrast your experience at the South Korean university with Columbia, which is in principle one of the great Western American institutions, educational institutions?
It's so I do think South Korea is way more technical. They are way more into trying to teach you the skill set. Like if more giving you actual knowledge. But okay, I think Americans are very obsessed. That was my impression at Columbia. We're really trying to help you how to think, but almost like you want to shape how you think. They are very into shaping your minds how you think about something. In South Korean study program was more like, oh, this is a fact, this is what happened in history, this is what we're gonna do, this is a model we're gonna apply to solve this criminal case. Like, this is how things work. But lately though, when it comes to sociology, it's been very influenced by the Western, like the mainstream education. So a lot of anti-Western sentiments was definitely there. And it's just I
In Korea
couldn't.
as well.
Oh yes, definitely all those like sociology and those subjects is definitely influenced. And South Korea is now becoming a communist again. Definitely it is a sad trend to see that like right now South Korean youth demand socialism. And you know freedom is so fragile, like it's never gonna be there if you don't fight for it. And South Korea's democracy is falling, and their speech freedom of speech right now in South Korea, like doctor, if you send those leaflets that we used to send to North Korea to free people's minds, so we used to send those leaflets about like you Kims are dictators, you are being lied. And that was freedom, self-expression that was covered by South Korean constitution. But now that just became criminalized in South Korea, like last few months ago.
What
So,
exactly was criminalized?
advocating freedom in North Korea. Because South Korea, but their defense is that because if we say we support freedom in North Korea, then North Korean regime saying we are going to start a war over you about that. So for the protecting South Korean people's freedom, you cannot advocate freedom for North Korean people in the South Korea.
And what do you think about?
This is another thing. There's gonna be a price for being silent about something like this happening, right? It's if they can come for this, well, how do we know they are not gonna go after other rights? That's how all this cycle begins. So it is definitely dangerous what they're taking to keep saying in the name of protection, in the name of this, we are gonna silence you, we're gonna silence this. And that's what North Korea did, right? In the name of equality, pure equality, you're gonna get rid of, freedom of speech, freedom of gathering, all of this. And now they're left with nothing. Only people are allowed to do is just breathing.
So why did you stay at Columbia?
It was my father's dream for me to be college educated. I found it was not worth it. It was so certificate degree that
it was so it was
a waste of time, energy, and money.
Really? That's a terrible thing. That's terrible.
It was. Honestly, I tell like my son that if you want to study humanity in one of these universities, I'm never gonna pay for it. Like I'm so clear on that to my son. But
I'm so embarrassed about that. I'm so embarrassed about that. It's so awful to hear that. Those universities, they were great, They were great.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And it's not that long ago that they were great, that they did what they said they were going to do. And if you went and got a humanities education, you got educated. You learned to write. You learned to think. You learned history. You learned to be cultured. That happened. It wasn't that long ago. It was when I went to university, it was still like that. When I taught at Harvard, it was still like that. There were politically correct murmurings and rumblings, but by and large, the university was still uncorrupted. And the humanities are at the core of the university. If they're corrupted, if they've gone in the way that you're already describing, there's no way the universities can survive. They're not technical schools. The core of the university was the humanities. I mean, look at what Animal Farm did for you. That's what reading great books does for people. It illuminates their soul. It's not optional. And I'm so appalled that that was your experience at Columbia. It's so awful that you went through all that and managed to get to this great university, and that you had to shut yourself down, and that your basic conclusion was that it was a waste of time. Now, did you have courses where that wasn't the case? Did you have courses that were worth it?
I mean, so one class I remember in my senior year, it was called the Western Civilization, the music art. One of the core that Columbia had is a Western art and the music.
Has still,
right,
not for long.
But then I was excited to learn about, but I thought at the end of the day, this is still the West. America is in the West, right? It would be funny if you want to study Eastern music at the end of in the core. And the professors like, who has a problem with calling the Western civilization like art? And then every single one of them all lifting their hands because they were saying there are so many artists who were greater than Beethoven and Mozart. We silenced them, erased them all. And that's why we have to now end up studying these like bigots, who are racist. And I'm like, and then they were like looking at me, why are you not putting your hands up? Somebody who doesn't have the problem with talking about Western civilization. So that's just like, I was like, do I even have to do this to graduate? And that was, of course, necessary to do that course to graduate. So every class had an element of being a politically correct and shaping you how you think. And I learned how to censor myself so well after Columbia. And then I was freaked out one day. It's like, what am I doing? This is not what I escaped, It just, and
I'm so ashamed of that. That's so awful. I can't believe it. You know, it's no picnic to watch these great institutions hang themselves.
Yeah. I literally felt like it's a suicide of civilization. Like we are killing ourselves here, and that's why, like, what I mean, that's what scares me is that when I was so grateful to going to South Korea was outside of North Korea, there was at least a place that was left to be free. And all these people obsessed fighting for, climate change, animals' rights, gender equality, transgender, whatever, all these things people are fighting for. Wonderful. But then imagine when nobody's free in this world, who's gonna fight for us? And that's like what terror for me is like. Imagine all of us became enslaved, like North Koreans, all of us did in that system. There's no one can stand up for any of us. And I guess because I always knew that it wasn't guaranteed. Like when I go to camping with my friends somehow always have confidence that they're gonna find food, even though when they're going to the remote area. Not me. I always packing this like energy bars, blah blah, always with me because I know like you can end up not having ever all the food. So maybe this is a mentality that in the West, freedom was always there. Somehow people think it's gonna be miraculously gonna be always there. And for me, it's like, no, it can be not there.
That's why we were supposed to be educating young people. We were supposed to be teaching them that no, it's not always there. It's fragile, and you better take care of it because the default condition is authoritarian starvation. And if that isn't happening, it's a bloody miracle.
Yeah, that is. And that's where I am at right now with North Korea. While of course I'm fighting for my people's freedom, but there's so much interest in, like even Hollywood, they do not want to stand up anything behind the thing is challenging Chinese Communist Party. No mainstream, no Hollywood stars, nobody in America want to be behind the movement that challenges Chinese Communist Party.
Well, I've seen this over and over in the universities too. You know, it was often the case that it was my psychology classes where the students learned about what happened in Stalinist Soviet Union and Maoist China. They hadn't been taught at all. They hadn't been taught that tens of millions of people died in China. They hadn't been taught about what happened in North Korea. They hadn't been taught about what happened in Russia. It was like that never existed, even though the Cold War was all about that. And it's appalling. And I think you see exactly the same thing. Well, you're pointing out exactly the same thing. How blind can we possibly be?
I know. It's like the people say like, oh, Hitler killed so many people, but do you know actually Mao killed the most human beings on earth? He killed like 50 to 60 million people. The Chinese communism killed more people than anybody ever did in our human history.
Yes, and the Chinese Communist Party still controls China. And the only reason people aren't starving to death there now is because they adopted, because they had no choice, essentially, because people did start to rebel to some degree. They introduced free market transformations. It's the only reason that China has emerged as powerful economically as it is.